Hi, I'm Maria, and today we will be making my Mexican chocolate cookies. These are great cookies for rolling out and cutting out, but you can also just scoop them and bake them too. Now to start, we have some brown butter here. This I put on in a little skillet for about 2-3 minutes until it gets kind of a nice golden, deep, nutty looking brown. And this is still hot. We want it to be hot because we're going to use it to bloom our cocoa powder and our cinnamon. And that's what makes it the Mexican chocolate, is adding the cinnamon. And here there's also a little bit of instant espresso. You could also use instant coffee if you wanted to. And it's nice. Whew. That's a cinnamon cloud. All right, so I'm just going to mix this up, and it's going to heat up the oils in the cinnamon and the cocoa and get a nice, even, dark color. I'm just going to scrape down the bowl a little bit. Then I'm going to start it again and stream in the sugar, and that will help cool down the butter some more. What we want to do is add the rest of our butter without it melting, because if you get your butter too soft, then it just kind of gets the cookies greasy and it spreads everywhere. So we'll add the sugar. Now I'm going to add the butter in like a chunk at a time. And we're just waiting for it to get nice and fluffy. The color of the chocolate will get a little bit lighter. All right, so our butter has creamed with the sugar and made it nice and fluffy. Looks kind of like frosting, but if you tasted it, which I'm want to do, it still has a gritty texture, like the sugar hasn't dissolved, which is the difference between this and frosting. Now we're going to add the eggs, and then I'll scrape down the bowl before we add the dry ingredients. All right, so the eggs are nicely incorporated in there. This is a combination of white whole wheat flour and oat flour. You can use all-purpose flour, but if you're going to be rolling out cookies, the more you roll out the dough, like when you have the scraps and you put them back together and you roll them out again, it develops the gluten and the cookies get tougher with each time you roll them out. With the oat flour, it doesn't have much gluten at all, so it makes your cookies softer through the whole process. So that's why I like the oat flour, plus it's better for you. This is baking soda and salt. And then these guys are toasted sesame seeds that I toasted over medium-high heat in a dry skillet. It took about 2 to 3 minutes. You just want them to get them kind of nutty brown. They'll start to pop, and that's when you want to pull them off, otherwise they kind of explode all over your kitchen. So we're just going to whisk all this together so that way we don't have any clumps. You don't want a big clump of baking soda in one cookie and not evenly distributed through the rest, or they don't work right. All right, and I'm just going to dump this in and then scrape it and let it mix again. All right, so there it's almost in. You can see there's still some streaks of flour. We don't want that. And again, since it has the oat flour, you don't have to worry about overmixing it either, which is why I love oat flour. All right, so there it is. That's your Mexican chocolate cookie dough. Now, there's a few things you can do with this. It's a great rolled cookie dough because it has just the yolks and not the whites of the eggs, so it doesn't get puffy. It stays nice and flat. But you can also just scoop these guys, and it makes a tasty cookie that way too. All right, so these guys I'm going to roll in some sugar. And they're kind of, because they don't spread a lot, they are kind of tall and chunky little cookies, which makes them great for dunking in coffee if you like that sort of thing. But I'm also going to show you a couple other things you can do. Now, because this is such a nice flat dough without the egg whites, it makes a great cutout cookie. And if I'm going to make cutout cookies, what I do is you want to chill the cookie and make it nice and firm. But I'll start out putting it in a plastic bag, and then we make it nice and flat, which makes rolling it out a lot easier and faster. So I'll just smush it flat, and then I'll store it in the fridge. Or if you make a bunch of the cookie dough, you can store these in the freezer, and then whenever you're ready to do it, it'll be waiting for you. You just want it to come, you don't want it to be room temperature, but you want to move it to the refrigerator for a couple hours before you try to roll it out, because if it's frozen solid, that butter is just going to want to crack instead of spread. So that's one thing you can do with it. Or an even easier way to go is to make a log of cookie dough. This is another thing that you can keep in your freezer for when you want it. And for that, what I'm going to do, put this dough like so, and then we just kind of roll it into a log. So for this guy, I'm going to coat him in a little, this is Demerara sugar, or crystal sugar, candy sugar, however you want to call it. They've got lots of names. You can use colored sugar if you were doing it for the holidays. Just kind of roll it around the outsides. It makes it a little prettier. When you cut the slices, it'll have like the texture. You could also use crushed nuts and have like a nutty ring around the outside, which would be pretty too. All right, just like that. Nice and coated, sparkly. And then this guy can go, what I do actually is I usually put them in either a toilet paper tube if they're small, or this one's kind of long, so what I would do is use the inside of a paper towel tube, and that keeps it nice and round in your freezer. So these guys are all going to go in the fridge for about 30 minutes just to kind of set them up, and then we can shape them and bake them. Okay, so here is the dough that's been chilled. It's nice and firm, but not too firm. And all I do is I open it up. Sometimes, most of the time, I can just peel it off like this. This does destroy your bag. If you need to, you can use scissors and cut along the side. Now this dough is a little bit delicate. Once I cut it out, I will have to put it back in the fridge before I can transfer those shapes to the cookie sheet. But frankly, that's because it's a better dough. Like if you use the some of the really easy to roll, cut, transfer, whatever, they're really stiff and they're not that tasty of a cookie. Frankly, if I'm going to go to all this effort, I want it to taste good at the end. So that. I'm just going to roll this guy out. Normally I do about 1/4 of an inch. You can go thinner, you can go thicker, depending on what you're doing with them. If you're doing more of a sandwich cookie with these guys, you want it to not be too delicate. If I'm just doing like a plain shape, I kind of like them skinny. All right, so that's about what we want. So I'm just going to do a couple examples. These guys, just a plain round cookie, make great sandwich cookies, and here's a little flower. Once I get these all cut out, they're going to go back into the fridge so we can take them off, because if I try to move these guys right now, they'll just kind of fall over. So you want them to be stiff so you can transfer them to the sheet you're actually going to bake them on. Okay, so this is the slice and bake dough that's been hanging out in my fridge. It could have also been in my freezer for an indefinite amount of time until I was ready to use it. And we just unroll it and slice it and then bake it, just like a slice and bake, hence the name. And you can make these as thick as you want. These are like between 1/4, 1/2 inch. You want a nice sharp knife so you don't mangle them too much, but you find like that. These also make nice sandwich cookies since they're round. If they get a little crumbly on the edges, just push them back together. Ooh, I can smell the sesame seeds that as I cut through them, and it releases more of their oils. It's very, very pungent. All right, so now I'm going to grab my cutout cookies that should be sufficiently chilled now, and we'll add these to the mix and then bake it all off. So here are the guys from the fridge. And I'm just going to use a little offset spatula to pull them off. And again, with these scraps, you kind of pile them up and then re-roll them. Once it's firm, it's a very nice shapely cookie. Like you get all of the details of the shapes, which is important in a cutout cookie. Now you don't have to worry about getting these guys too close together, because they're not going to spread very much at all. They might puff a little, but they won't spread out and run into each other. So they're just fine like this. And I'm going to put them in the oven. It's a 350-degree oven. It'll be about 8 to 12 minutes. Okay, cookies are out of the oven, and you can see the varieties here. These guys are the ones that we just scooped. Actually, these would be really good for putting like the Hershey's Kisses in and making those type of cookies because they're nice and crystally looking. Good dunkers. These are the slice and bake. You can really see the sesame in those guys, which is kind of nice. You could also frost those or put like chocolate on them as they come out of the oven and then smear it on, make kind of a chocolate coating. These are our pretty little cookies. You can see they hold their shape really well, which is the great thing about this dough. And then these guys you could use as sandwich cookies. You could put peanut butter in the middle, you could put frosting, you could put like that caramel you get at the grocery store over by the apples, whatever you want. It's a really versatile cookie recipe. You can do whatever you want with it. That's what I say about my Mexican chocolate cookies.